Welcome everybody to World's Strongest Opinions, episode 52 with Kevin Ross. For those of you who don't know, because this is typically a strongman-centric podcast, Kevin Ross has an extensive Muay Thai and kickboxing background. World champions with the WBC, Lion Fight, Muay Thai. You have the kickboxing world title with Bellator, which I was at. And I'm going to go into a quick background of how this came to be. Get my little air freshener out of the way. The only sports I follow are combat sports. I don't really have the bandwidth for team sports with all the number of games and stuff going on. My good buddy Nick Jones got me into MMA in the Navy. And then, fast forward to 2016, I moved to California. Just happened to go to a fighting gym, which is great for me, being that that's the only sport that I follow. And so I started getting familiar with some of the fighters at the gym, some of the top fighters and some of the pros. And I want to say it was maybe 4 or 5 months, Kevin, before you did your Bellator kickboxing world champion. I started seeing some videos about your background and stuff. And John, as you remember, when I was on last time, I got a bit of a late start into weightlifting. So seeing that, Kevin, the first time you stepped into a fighting gym, you were in your mid-20s, right?
23.
And so to see a story like that, I was like, man, that's really similar to mine. And then strength sports are more accommodating to older athletes, whereas fighting, kind of like gymnastics, once you hit a certain age, people start to think it's too late. And so going into Clash of the 90s last year, going into this pro circuit for strongman, I needed to get my conditioning up. And so I got a treadmill circuit from the fighters up front because, they're absolute savages. And after doing the circuit for a little over a year and a half, I finally asked my friend Katie, who gave it to me. I was like, who came up with this thing? Like, this thing fucking sucks. Every time I do it, I'm like crying and I want to give up. And I always get through it. And my conditioning has improved substantially. Like, where did this come from? And she's like, oh, Kevin Ross, invented this. I'm like, oh, geez, I haven't seen that guy since, you moved down to SoCal and now you're in middle of the country. But it kind of reminded me of all those things, getting started with strongman and starting to be more competitive, that, I found your story inspirational. And I know a lot of people like to be inspired by athletes within their sport, but I feel like there's really no reason for that kind of restriction or limitation. I feel like the mindset of a successful athlete, or the mindset of somebody that might get a late start and where they're going to go, it transcends sports. I mean, if you're going to be a successful athlete, if you're going to have a champion level performance, that mindset, it comes from, it's transferable to all different sports. So I kind of wanted to get your story out to a different audience than it's been in the past, and just get people, because people get so locked into writing themselves off and dismissing themselves and coming up with a reason why they can't do something. And 99% of those reasons are going to be less extreme than the reasons you could have come up with when you got started. So I think getting your story out there could really be beneficial to a lot of people that maybe are not familiar with you.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. I mean, I was one of those people that viewed my perceived limitations as the reason I couldn't accomplish anything, the reason I could never get started. I learned about the sport of Muay Thai when I was 15, but it took me almost 10 years to finally face all those fears that I had and all those doubts that I had, and say, I got to go forward regardless of how I feel about this, because I'm never going to know what's going to happen unless I go forward. So, yeah, as I said, I learned about the sport when I was 15, but when I was about 12 is when I started drinking and getting into drugs and really, really bad stuff. And then unfortunately, when I was 15, I moved to Vegas, which is like pouring gasoline on a fire. It's like the worst place in the world if you're inclined to that kind of lifestyle, so it was just all downhill from there. And then over the years that progressed further and further and further. And that idea and dream of fighting was always stuck in the back of my head. Like I really want to do it, if maybe one day I'll get around to it. And, but I knew I was kind of full of shit. I was like, I'm not really going to do it. And then I used that excuse of I'm too old. I'm too weak. I was a really skinny, shy kid who was very self-destructive. I was like, I don't have all those elements that all these people do have that make it, particularly that sport, which is from Thailand. America is one of the last countries to get it. You know, nobody knew what Muay Thai was here at that time. So to think that I was going to be able to do anything in the sport was just ridiculous to me. And I let that be my rationale for not doing it, you know. But as the years went on, every time I would see a fight, it would like spark that flame. I'm like, oh man, one of these days I'm gonna go check this out, you know. But I just continued to drink and destroy my life, and all these bad things kept happening. Friends dying, going to jail, myself almost dying and going to jail countless times. And every time it felt like someone was smacking me in the face, like, you better wake up, and do this. You're going to be dead soon. Right. And then unfortunately in, 99, one of my best friends passed away. He actually passed away because he had a heart defect when he was born. And when he passed away, he was actually the only person I had ever told about this dream I had of fighting, you know. And when I told him, expecting him to laugh at me, he was just like, well, why don't you do it? You know, and I told him all those reasons that I had and all those excuses that I had. And he was like, man, if anybody can do it, you can. And I don't know why he thought that about me. If you had known me back then, there's no way you would have thought that about me. You're like, you're fucking stupid if you think you're going to be a fighter one day. Right. But then when he passed away, I promised myself that I was going to go after this. You know, I was like, he didn't even get the chance to fail at a dream. And here I am too afraid to try because of all these factors. But it's really just, you're afraid to fail. And I promised myself that I would finally go after this. I'm going to live my life for him, even if it's not for myself. You know, I owe it to him to do this. But unfortunately, his death set me even farther off the edge, you know, and things got really, really bad for the next couple of years. And one day it just smacked me right in the face. I was like, if my friend was still alive, he'd beat the fuck out of me. He's like, I promised him when he died that I would live my life for the both of us. And not only have I not done that, but I've gone in the opposite direction, and it's so much worse now. And it was just that moment when I couldn't look myself in the mirror any longer after that, you know, and I was like, none of those reasons I'm giving myself matter anymore. Yeah, I have to do this. I have to go forward. If not for myself, then at least for him. And I already knew how much of my life I had wasted. I knew that I shouldn't be alive anyway. So I'm like, everything from this point forward is extra credit. You're not supposed to be alive right now, right? So regardless of how you feel, regardless of what it looks like, how it seems to other people, how it may even seem to yourself, like, you have a decision to make. And that was the thing that hit me square in the face. Like, no matter what, we have a choice. We always have a choice, even if somebody's got a gun to our head. Like, you can tell them to pull the fucking trigger or you can do what they're telling you to do, right? You still have a choice. It might not be a choice you like, but you got a choice. And after that clicked in my brain, 100% of my life was dedicated to going towards this goal. It's like, I don't know where this is going to go. I don't even know if I'm ever going to get one fight, let alone ended up having 75 and 20 plus years of doing it, you know. But from that point forward, I just took every day, every moment as this is all you have. You're not guaranteed a second from now, let alone tomorrow, 10 years from now. You have today, you have right now. What are you going to do with this time that you have? And are you going to use it to get better? Or are you going to let it keep destroying yourself? And looking at things through that lens really altered my entire life and my perception of reality. Really, it was always that you're either going left or you're going right decision, regardless of what it is. You know, is what you're doing right now helping you get closer or farther away from where you want to be?
True.
And you did some pretty big things as far as pioneering American Muay Thai. I mean, you went over to Thailand. You made some waves with, I mean, it was like you said, we were the last ones to get Muay Thai. So you kind of went over there and people externally were writing you off. I can't remember the guy's name that you beat. I'm not going to try and butcher it, but you went over there and you proved a lot of doubters wrong, and you showed what American Muay Thai was becoming kind of before it was really established here.
Yeah. I mean, it was when I was coming up, nobody knew what it was. You couldn't even tell people that's what you did. You know, you'd have to say it's kind of like kickboxing, but not really at all. You know, which is for a Muay Thai fighter, it's like heartbreaking. You know, it's like telling a rugby player that they play football, right? Like, yeah, it's kind of the same, but it ain't the same whatsoever.
Or a strongman that they do powerlifting. Yeah, I get it. We get the same kind of people.
Yeah, right. So, when you're trying to explain it to people, and most of the time you're just like, yeah, it's like kickboxing, because you don't feel like giving someone a history lesson, right? And every time you do, it's like, oh my God, like I'm dying inside right now. But yeah, one of the, as so many things that should have been hindrances, I just use them as fuels, like my age being one, the country I was from, the way that I grew up. I used all these things as motivation, because it's so easy to get complacent, particularly when, like, say you start when you're younger, your body feels great. You have all this natural cardio conditioning, flexibility, ability to take punishment and damage. It's like I'm starting already so far behind. And I always viewed myself I always looked at the unattainable as my goal. Like, my goal is to be the best I can ever be. I don't know what that is. That's unattainable in my eyes. That's impossible in my eyes. So everything I'm doing is geared towards getting closer to that goal,
Right.
And again, it's like, is what I'm doing right now helping me get closer, or am I getting farther away? So that's why I always had that extreme drive and motivation to just push myself past all my perceived limitations, pain, difficulty, other people's experience level, strength level, size, and I just, it didn't necessarily take my fear away. It just put it into a simple terms, right? It's like, so what if you're afraid? What's that have to do with anything? Are you going to go for this with everything that you have, or are you not? It doesn't matter how you feel about it, right? It's like, we all have fucking feelings and reasons not to do shit. Like that's not what dictates whether someone makes it or not. It's someone that faces that and goes forward anyway. Like, we all feel the same things. We all have the same doubts and fears and reasons that we feel certain ways. It's only a matter of making a choice. That's the only thing that separates people that accomplish things and the ones that don't. Seeing all these different stories from people all over the world, and the ones that make it and the ones that don't, has very little to do with talent and natural ability. Most of the time that is actually a hindrance, because things become easier to you. It's usually the person that really had to struggle and strive and push themselves and find a way to make it work. That's the thing that develops our abilities, because we're all so unique anyway. You can't try to do what somebody else did. They're completely
different. Yeah, and plus you really have to grind it out. You're not going to take it for granted, like somebody that woke up and just started peeing excellence. Like, if you had to work and you had to sweat and blood, sweat, and like all that stuff, if that's what it took for you to get something, you're a lot less likely to just let it go and let it waste away, because you can't take that for granted when you've put that much of yourself into it.
Yeah, and it's like, anytime those feelings of wanting to quit or thinking I didn't have anything left, it was just, I learned how to use that as a trigger to push me farther. Like, I know that there's another gear after this. I just have to push through this one that I think's the last one. And once you do that, and you do that consistently, you really learn how much more you have, how much farther you can go, how much more you can deal with, how much pain you can take, how much stronger you really are. And every time you're continually raising that bar, we think our bar is so low, and you just have to force yourself to push it higher and higher and higher. It's always higher than you think it is, regardless of what the case may be. You can always go a little bit more. And the worst thing you can ever do is look back on something that, I probably could have pushed it a little harder than I did. But when you're in the moment, you feel like, this is it. I don't have anything left. My body's done. What am I supposed to do? Like, just do one more. Just do one more. And when you do, you learn each time, I'm stronger than I think. I have a lot more than I think. And it was just that was just like a daily journey for me. Like, where is my line? And I want to keep pushing it. And I know I'm going to push it harder than you're going to push it. So that was kind of what allowed me to compete with and beat so many of the people that I did. Because it was like, I know I'm willing to go farther than you. Like, I already feel like I'm already been dead, like, this is extra for me. Like, I'm willing to go to that point because I've already been there and faced it. And seen it and looked it in the eye. I'm like, are you willing to do that? That's the question.
Right.
And
you bring them to a point where they have to take their strength and their talent and their youthfulness and go into that area with you in order to utilize it to beat you. And if they don't have that in them, they're not going to get there.
Yeah. It's like that, going to that dark place. And most people aren't comfortable in that dark place, because anytime they get close to that dark place, they hold themselves back. And when you meet someone that is comfortable there and is at home in the darkness, like, that's a dangerous person, regardless of what field you're in. When you know someone's willing to push it past anything imaginable, like, that's almost an impossible person to beat.
Yeah, you mentioned, you raise the bar, and that's your new bar, and that's where you then raise it from again. And actually, that's kind of how I think about it. I actually hiked Mission Peak, which is like a big thing that everyone in this area does. But I've been in California 6 years, so July 4th, like, you know what? I'm going to hike Mission Peak, because otherwise I can't really say I'm living in Northern California. And I'm sitting here like, oh, I'm a strong man. I'm a pro strong man with great conditioning now. This should be easy. And it took me almost 4 hours, and I just about died. And I went home and I took like a 4-hour nap. I'm like, that should not have been that hard. But I started doing it every week because I identified it as a weakness. Mm-hmm. But kind of like what you're saying, it's a very steep hike right off the bat. And so I feel the burn, and I feel exhausted immediately. And I'm always like, man, I don't think I'm going to make it today. But I always think like, well, this is what it felt like last week, and I made it last week. So I kind of use that. I refer to it as like a base camp. Like when you're hiking a mountain. Like, now that I've experienced a certain level of pain and gotten through it, that's my new base camp. And that's where I'm starting to go up again from. So you never go back down below that. That's your starting point now. And kind of like what you're saying is, now that the bar has been raised, that's the point from which you then raise the bar again. So it's not one huge raise. It's incremental. Like you keep finding out what you're capable of. You keep learning about yourself. And as you learn these things and develop these experiences, that's now a foundation for you to do the same thing, but go even higher.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like, if you've never lifted 10 pounds, you're not going to lift 500, right? It's exactly. Like we have to continually put that bar just past what we perceive as our limit. And that's how we grow. Okay. You can't put it so far past that you just can't fucking do it. And you break yourself in half, and then you're laying in bed for a week because you tore your pec muscles or something like that. Right. But just past what you think. And that's how you continually push it. And I mean, that's how everything in life works. It's a steady progression, or it's a steady regression. And it's all these seemingly insignificant things that tend to develop our strength or our weakness. And it's the people that pay attention to those things, the little things that nobody else sees, the mindset that you have, those moments where you could have been weak and you're strong, even if it's from what you're eating to what you're thinking about, what you're doing. And the more we can take control of that, the more we can raise our bar past what other people do that might have more athletic ability or strength or speed than us, because they're not paying attention to the little details. And the little details are everything.
It's very true. I was thinking about that, of how important it is to just keep moving forward and everything. I think oftentimes people like to either set such unrealistic goals they can't attain them, or find excuses for why they didn't do it, because that's much easier than accepting that you didn't try. Is just to say, here's how far it is. Of people, like, you'll see people decide to do things like set a goal of losing 100 pounds, which can be really hard, because in reality, especially when you're overweight, like, losing 3 pounds isn't even noticeable. When that's the hardest part, is like doing those things. So it's interesting when you talk about that, just kind of incremental progress, because oftentimes it's this idea of people, you see people online who it seems like they're an overnight success, but they've been doing this for over a decade. Yeah. Because that's what you don't see, is like the stuff that led to getting on that stage. Exactly. And everything. So I think it's really an impressive story, because it is important too.
I think that's exacerbated too by like Hollywood and stuff, where you watch this inspirational sports movie and this guy went from nothing to champion inside of after a 15-minute training montage. And don't get me wrong, I love those training montages, but people don't see the hard work that goes into it. And I've noticed it working with athletes in strength. is you'll start working with somebody and like, oh, I'm determined. I'm going to do everything it takes. And they're getting fired up about the training. They think the training is the hard part. And it's like, no. That's actually the part that's fun. That's the part that's easy. If that's the part that's hard to you, you're already messed up. But I think they're looking at these movies and it's glorifying this quick transition. It's like, no, the way you eat, the way you sleep, the consistency over years, that's the hard part. Doing the rehab work when you get injured, when you have to like kind of relearn how to walk after, like when I tore my Achilles, when you're having to do that stuff, you're doing the boring stuff that you don't want to post on Instagram because no one's going to want to look at that. That kind of stuff that's not glamorous, that kind of stuff that it sucks. It's boring. It's taking time out of your day and you don't even feel like it's doing anything. Those kinds of things are actually where a lot of that is built. And people go in and I think they come in with an unrealistic expectation. And kind of like what you're saying, like if you set a goal to lose 100 pounds, like that might be the end goal. And that's not a bad goal to have. You shouldn't start on day one like I'm going to lose 100 pounds. What you really should be doing is trying to lose 10 pounds 10 times. And break that up into something. It's okay to have a dream and a long-term goal, but if there's no short-term goals to get you from point A to point B, you're kind of just spinning your wheels, and pretty quick you're going to run out of wind. Your sails will be out of wind, and you're like, well, how the hell am I going to get to 100 pounds? I just lost 4 pounds, and that felt like the most difficult thing in the world. They're not. There's nothing sustainable. There's nothing short-term for them to focus on. Right around the corner to get them to that end goal. And I feel like that. I love these Hollywood movies, these inspirational sports stories, but I think they have created a bunch of, maybe a generation of athletes that have an unrealistic expectation of how they're supposed to achieve what they want to do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that I kind of view that the same way I view like a highlight video of a fighter. And, it's like anybody can look good in a highlight video. You're showing every piece of you looking like a fucking badass, right? So the first highlight video I ever had made of my fighting, it was very important for me to show all of my really bad, awful moments. Me getting knocked the fuck out and getting my head split open and caved in, and also what I had to do to pick myself back up and build back up. It's like everybody has to go. If anybody's at the top, they've had to go through that. No one can get there and stay there unless they've lost and been broken down. It's like failure is what paves the road to success, but we don't show people the failures. And that's why it was always very important for me to be vocal about my failures, my hard times, the times I had doubts and injuries and losses, and like, this is fucking part of it. And if you're not willing to go through this, you shouldn't even get started. Like if you're not willing to do this when you suck, when you're failing, when everyone's telling you need to quit and do something else, you should probably do something else, right? Everyone would do this shit if it was easy and you were successful at it. Like if all you've ever been is successful, then I'd say you're not successful until you've been able to fail and get crushed and then pick yourself back up and get back in there.
But I think also
go for it.
I think also the people or the athletes who are winners, who are like really great in their sport, which they're doing, they also have a different perspective on all these things. Of course, viewing a highlight and going into competition is fun, is great and stuff, but we all know it's not these times which build us. It's the times which really suck, the off season, the hard conditioning, which really makes you laying down and hyperventilating because you're not getting any air anymore, or your legs are burning or your lungs are burning. It's all this stuff. When you are rehabbing, you are going through pain. You have to push through pain and you have to be patient. And day by day, you're pushing yourself and you're trying to achieve something because okay, each small thing, like you said, each small little detail, each repetition, each meter or kilometer or whatever, which you are running, will help you in the end to achieve this highlight moment. So we know, okay, this helps us, but many, they don't. They just see it as, okay, this is something which I have to do, which is necessary, perhaps is necessary, but I want to compete. I want to fight. I want to do that. But they're not investing their time and their full energy into what is really important, and that is building the right foundation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I saw a quote the other day. It was basically the difference between somebody that's committed and somebody that's just interested. Where someone that's committed to achieving something, when some big chunk of adversity comes up, the immediate thought is, how do I solve this? Whereas somebody that's just interested in accomplishing something, a big adversity comes up, like, oh, I guess I wasn't meant to do this. I guess, this isn't for me. I gotta find something else, because they're just so easily discouraged. But you have to be committed, and that's the thing is now, I work as an engineer, and the whole task of engineering is getting a sometimes seemingly unsolvable issue come up. And the whole thing is, okay, well, how do we solve it?
Yeah.
You might have to solve it in an unconventional way. You might have to, create an entirely new path of thinking to get there, because this might be something that's never been done before. But if your thought process isn't, how do I solve this? You're probably not going to. It has to be the initial thing is right away is, okay, here's this thing that's come up. How do I get around it? How do I get through it, over it, under it, whatever you have to do to get the other side of it. And some people, the moment something comes up, it's like, oh, I guess this really wasn't for me. And it's like the very first time they've been challenged. And kind of like what you're saying, Kevin, with people that are successful right out of the gate, where it can be a detriment to be naturally talented, is if they've never been challenged, if they've never been through adversity, the first time it comes up, they have no idea how to handle it. They're like, wait, what is it? But then there's people that have come up from the bottom, from nothing or from less than nothing, to be a champion, and adversity comes up and they just kind of laugh, like, this is it. This is all you've got for me. Like, everything I've been through is so much harder than this.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was starting out and coming up, I was around so many really talented people that were just going on these undefeated streaks, from the first day, like just crushing people left and right. And my very first fight, I got the fuck kicked out of me. I didn't even make it out of the second round, right? So I got stopped, I got annihilated, I got crushed, and that all those thoughts and all those fears and doubts came flooding back in, and it was like, yeah, see, this isn't meant for you. You're not meant to do this. If you were meant to do this, you would have won. You would have beat that guy. And it was that moment where I realized that I had a choice to make. Like, maybe I'm not supposed to be the greatest of all time, right? Maybe I'm not even supposed to be the best in the world, but I'm not going to know how good I can be unless I refuse to give up and keep going forward, unless I use this to push me farther. And that's what I did. And then I went on and won every single amateur fight I had from that point forward. And, and my career developed from there. And then the people that I saw who were going undefeated, as soon as they had their first loss, a lot of them never fought again. Many of them never fought again. And many of them were never the same ever again, because they just couldn't wrap their brain around it. They didn't know how to do it, because it's like when you fail, you have to dissect why you failed, what you could have done to be better. And that's how you progress and build and work on those things that you inevitably are going to need, because you're going to face those things again. But if you don't face them, you're not going to push yourself in those areas because you think you got it. It's like, I don't need to work on this. I don't need to work on that. And that's where natural ability can be an extreme hindrance unless you have that internal drive. And that's really where you do get the greatest of all time, like the Mayweathers and the Jordans and stuff. It's like, yeah, they had natural ability, but they had a sickening work ethic. If you don't have both, you'll never make it. And the one thing we can all do is have a sickening work ethic. It doesn't matter if you have any talent. You can make up for all that shit, man. I was like, that's one thing I relied on. It's like, I know I can outwork you. I know that I'm willing to suffer more than you. And I know that I will never, ever quit, because I'd rather die than quit. And knowing that, it just got me through so much and allowed me to push myself so much harder, because we all have that internal survival mechanism that holds us back from pushing past our breaking points. It's a natural instinct to hold yourself back and to stay safe, particularly when you're in an actual physical confrontation, whether that's a fight or a workout or whatever. It's a physical demanding thing that can result in injury and even in extreme cases, death. And when those injuries or moments happen, your brain goes into safety mode. It's like, you need to stay safe. And you have this internal conversation, whether it's conscious or unconscious at times, that tells you to stop, tells you to stay safe. I mean, I have so many recollections of moments in fights where I'd get hit and so hard, and it's that you could just go down right now and you got hit hard. No one on the outside would know that you let that work. It's like, you can see when people quit. I mean, I can see when people quit, even though most people wouldn't catch it. When somebody gets caught by something or whatever, you still do have a choice. Obviously, there's the times when you're just out cold, right? And you don't have a choice. But you can see it, the decision that's going on. And the problem is people think once they get in there, they're going to be able to make that decision. If you haven't made that decision in the training, in the day-to-day grind, it's not going to come out when all the cards are on the table. Like you're going to fold. You're going to fold because you held yourself back in your training and in your preparation, and your subconscious knows that about you, that you give up when it gets hard, and you will give up when the time comes.
Yeah. That's actually one of the, as a fan, that's one of the things I like about combat sports. There is a very unique element to combat sports where you, like you said, you can see when somebody is afraid or not committed. And like you said, you have these undefeated, fighters that the first time they get defeated, they might never come back, or they come back and they're never the same.
Yeah.
It's not like that with team sports like basketball and stuff like that, where you can get crushed in a game and then come back the next week and do a lot better. Like there's a lot more forgiveness in a lot of sports. With MMA or Muay Thai or kickboxing, I mean, that's another one too, where, in basketball, if you make an egregious error on a play and nothing but, you're not hitting the rim or anything, you come back and hit it the next play. But in combat sports, if you make a mistake and you get hit the right way, you're done. You could have been winning the whole fight. Yeah. I mean, I want to say it was like a year ago, Derek Lewis in the UFC was getting his ass kicked for 3 rounds. And in the last 10 seconds, he knocked the guy out.
Yeah. MMA
is or any of the combat sports, that's one of those things where a mistake can very quickly change the entire thing. You could have all the momentum in the world, and one mistake can lead to a completely different outcome. Yeah. And I think that's where you see a lot of that fear exposed, and a lot of that when that adversity comes up to someone that's not prepared for it, not committed enough, you see it change them that way.
Yeah. That's why I love combat sports, because it's a perfect metaphor for life. Everything that we face, from doing really well, then something bad happens, or vice versa, and you just see what really matters in the long run. It's like, what are you willing to push through? And that's it. Like, how much pain can you take? How much failure can you take? How much adversity can you take? And what happens when everything is working against you? As well as how do you behave when everything's going your way? Like, do you just become some shithead that thinks they're the best in the world and just talking trash to everybody? And, there's a place for that in every aspect of life, because we need everybody's different personalities. So I'm not going to say that that's right or wrong, but it really does show you what people are truly made of. I mean, the second someone's across the ring from me, whether it's in the gym or in a fight, like, I know everything about that person almost immediately. I don't even have to say a word to them. You can see it in their eyes. You can see it in the way they carry themselves. I know whether you're strong and willing to push yourself, or whether you're going to break and fold. And if I see that little chink in the armor, like, that's a fucking wrap, man. Like, you're just done. It exposes everything about you. Like, you're out there in front of the world naked, basically, because all that stuff about you internally gets exposed. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about just competitive things in general, especially like that singular person as opposed to the team aspect, because it's just you, regardless of the team behind you. It's just you out there, and you can't lie to anybody anymore, and you especially can't lie to yourself, because that all of your training, all of your mindset, all of your preparation, that gets exposed, and you're going to see what you actually did to prepare yourself for that moment.
Right. Speaking about all this stuff, I would be curious, and I think even the audiences would be curious to hear how a training, a normal training week would look like for you in like your peak times, let's say.
It's a lot. Because pretty much
just short, because in strength sports and even in bodybuilding circles and stuff like that, there's this rumor going around where everyone is maybe going to be overtrained if they're doing a bit too much, and I don't know what. So everyone is afraid, and they're not giving what they actually could, if you understand. But I know combat athletes, they do way more than we think, so I would be curious to hear that.
Yeah. I mean, they do, and we do, and you certainly should. When it all comes down to it, though, it's more about the quality of your training as opposed to the quantity, particularly once you start to really develop and make it to the higher levels, although it's still like, I don't know, like 8 hours a day of training. And that's just the gym stuff. That's not the what you're eating and what you're watching and studying and all that. So, I mean, it's a full-time job. If you're serious about it, it has to be a full-time job. So I mean, typically it's 5 to 6 days a week, 2 sessions a day, and each session's probably 4 hours, 3 to 4 hours. And that varies depending on the fight and so many other factors, but it's like the running, the pad work, the sparring, the conditioning work, the strength work, the body temperament work, the high intensity stuff, the low intensity stuff, the sparring, the clinching, the bone strengthening, like kicking hard shit all the time. And I mean, the hard thing is learning how to gear it towards what will benefit you, because you can't just say like, this is what you do, everybody throw them in there and that's what happens. It's like there's so many factors that can change. Like not everyone's going to train the way I do, because I train the way I do for very specific reasons. Like my cardio and conditioning is always the most important for me, because I know I need to have that to be my base, because I can't control. I mean, the people I'm fighting have been doing this since they were 6 and 7 years old, right? So I have to be able to have that as my base, because I can't make up for the skill factor, right? I need to be able to have my strength and conditioning and my ability to take pain and punishment, and I was fortunate to come up. Everyone I worked with was 15 plus pounds bigger than me. So I was always sparring and working with just these giant dudes beating the fuck out of me all the time. But then it's like when I go in there and fight somebody my size, I'm like, like that ain't nothing to me, man. You know what I mean? So that's the kind of thing that contributed to that fearlessness I had when I fought, and just the way I am naturally, but being able to go in there every day with people who can just end your life, it's like, that's what we need, those people around us so we raise our bar. If you're the best person in the gym, it's very hard to elevate yourself or even to stay at a certain level. You have to have people that are pushing you, that are testing you, that are checking you every day. Be like, this is where you're weak. You better fix it.
Yeah.
And if you don't fix it, you're not going to make it out of the day, and they keep you honest with yourself, because we can only hold ourselves so accountable. No matter how hard you try, you can never hold yourselves as accountable as somebody else will. It's kind of like why I do those sprints on the treadmill, because a treadmill can't lie to you, right? You can be outside running sprints and saying, I'm pushing it as hard as I can. Like, no, you're not. There's just no way. There's no way. You have to being able to see the numbers on the screen. Like, this is how fast you're going. This is how long you're doing it for. And if you jump off, you're quitting. Right.
Right. So or if you don't increase the speed like you're supposed to. Yeah. I've noticed that.
So to have things like that or people like that around you, I think is the only way to truly reach the heights you could reach in this world. I mean, if you don't have that external force pushing you, I mean, at the very least, you need to have your own internal person that's like, you're not doing enough. You need to push it harder. You need to stop being a little bitch about this and go faster. Right. I was fortunate that I always had that internal drive, but not everybody has that. And it's not to say you can't make it if you don't. You just better have some really strong people around you that are pushing you and keeping you from taking shortcuts.
It's true. Because I think oftentimes, especially I'd say combat sports are some of like the most challenging because it is all on you. You can't blame how the team played. You can't blame anything other than how you personally performed there. At least with strongman, we can use the excuse of blaming promoters, bad equipment, and the location. Whereas in a fight, the referee, we can blame the judges. Like
that never happens.
In a fight, you're knocked out, and you're just knocked out. Like,
well, people do that in fighting as well, but it's that same kind of thing. It's the whole victim mentality. Like, people know who's real and who's not. You might fool the audience, you might fool the people watching, but you're not going to fool the fighters. You're not going to fool the people who have dedicated their lives to this. And the truth always comes out in the end. The real will always rise to the top, and the fake will always fall by the wayside. And that's I don't get discouraged when I see the prevalence of that kind of fakeness, particularly at this time in the world with everything and social media and stuff, because I feel like that just makes the real shine that much brighter. It's not hard to see who's real and who's not, particularly when you have so much fakeness and the show life of everybody. It's all a front for stuff, and who's really doing the work and who's doing the work for the camera, and that comes out when you get put to the fire.
You talked about when you got started, you got your ass kicked right out the gate, a lot of adversity straight up. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's no answer to this, but can you think of anything, say once you started to find success, once you had that momentum, once you were becoming an established Muay Thai fighter, was there any kind of adversity at the point where you were successful now that hit you in a different way, that you had to overcome in a different way or change your mindset to adjust to? Or was it just applying the same principles that you always had the same way?
Yeah, both, I would say. I mean, so many things. I dealt with just countless adversities and injuries and bad fights and losses. And that underlying mindset is what I always applied to it. But the thing that really caught me off guard was, I blew my knee out back in, 2012 or whatever, and then came back from that. And I would have thought that would have been just the most difficult thing to go through, mentally, physically, emotionally, all of that. And so I made it through all that. And then I think it was like 3 years before I retired, I broke my thumb, just this little fucking joint. And in so many ways, that was more devastating to me than when I blew my knee out. It was like such a tiny thing. And you think you've gone through that before, you've gone through so much before. I have this strength, right? And it's that little thing that you don't think would affect you at all. That just was, I was like, fuck, man, like, this is so stupid. It's the stupidest, like, it's my thumb. Like, what is it? But I can't use it. I can't use my hand. I can't fight. Right. And that what I realized then was it's like the journey never ends. Just because you're strong doesn't mean you stay that way forever. It's always, you're going one way or you're going the other way. You don't just get there and stay there. The only way to even stay there is to push yourself. That's just to stay at this level. Right. And if you're not pushing yourself there, you're declining. And that was just another one of those moments. And I just laughed at myself because I started feeling sorry for myself for a little bit. I'm like, this is bullshit. And I'm like, fuck all this. I'm like, all right, man, like, you got to apply those same principles. Like, what are you going to do about it? Right. What are you going to do about it? That was always the question in my mind when things would happen, losses, injuries, whatever. It's like, what are you going to do about it? Are you going to use this to get better? Or are you going to let it destroy you and make you weak and make you a victim the rest of your life? And that never goes away, because failure is always right here. We're not even any farther away from that point. It's like I turned my life around when I started training and from my alcohol addiction and just lifestyle, but I'm not any farther away from that than I was the first day. It's right there. I could be there today, right now. I could fucking just go right over here and just start getting fucking wasted, and everything I did in the last 20 years would be gone, So in some ways that can be disheartening, but at the same time, I think it's very motivational. It's like, I know that you're always in the fight, and you have a choice to make. That's it. It's very simple. You know, nobody's necessarily strong or weak. We're all we're in the fight, and we're either pushing ourselves or we're weakening ourselves.
Yeah, that's something that's always been attractive to me about physical fitness. Is physical fitness, strength, that kind of stuff. It can't be given to you. You can't buy it. So not only if you see somebody that's really strong or in really good shape or really committed, to the fitness, not only do you know that they had to work to get that, but you also know that they're having to work every single day to maintain it. Yeah. It's not something that's just, you got it and now it's established. It can, like, the moment you stop, it goes away. And you can get it back, sure, but when you see somebody that right now is in great shape and somebody that has a lot of strength, you know that they're staying on top of it every single day.
Yeah.
And Emanuel, you had a pretty bad injury before your world record log, correct? So you have some experience with some of this adversity and coming back as well. And do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, this. I talked about this in the last episode with Lucas Brody and Atlas Power Shrug, and just for Kevin again, and to repeat again, so 1 year prior to breaking the log lift world record, which now got broken again, but not from me. I did a 180 kilo log lift, and the next year after, I had a really hardcore injury. So I tore both two muscles at the same time, one neck muscle and the rear delt. And I had also some neurological issues. So with the left side, it didn't matter what I did. So if it was a press or a pull or anything, with the left arm, even 10 kilos, so basically like 20 pounds, was like really heavy to move. With the right side, it was easy. Overhead movement, so just to bring my arm overhead, it was so restricted, I couldn't even raise it more than like 130 degrees or so. So I couldn't even bring it full overhead. And it took me a few months until I got back to be without pain and to be able to go to 130 kilo log lift again. But it took me 1 year to go back to 170 with focusing on this again and being fully committed. And it took me until last year to go to 190 kilo, so, and this was in 2019. So until last year was 3 years where I had to really fight to get my shoulder strength and health and everything back. And it just was every day something to do. I really had to focus on overcoming all these issues and the restrictions and the pain. And if you're not willing to do, you will, these things will come back, and if you're not paying attention, things will just get worse, But it's always, like Kevin said, it's always a matter of choice. Which choice are you making? Are you making the choice to get better, or are you making the choice to get worse because you won't stay the same?
Yeah.
It's very important, I think, because I like the theme of that idea of like, it's all about the journey, because there really is no destination. And I think that's so powerful, because it's like that quote everyone's been putting around recently of the person who likes walking will go more places than the person who just likes the destination. Because it is so easy to think like, so many people, we'd all love to go to amazing places, but it's like that takes time to get there. And I think that having that mindset of just enjoying the journey, because it is consistent, you can stop at any time and you can just go back. But if you learn to love that progression, no matter what the pace is going forward, if you're always moving forward, you're going to go places rather than like, it can be easy to just settle of that idea with your fights to say, there are so many people who hate losing or hate the embarrassment of not doing well, that they'd rather just not do something at all. Like you'd rather not do it at all than to lose 14 fights, but to win 45. Like, that's a huge deal of like, so many people don't get to experience that mountaintop because they don't want to go to those base camps, because getting to the mountaintop's hard, and it's always going to be consistent travel because the mountain just gets bigger in this case.
It's always been fascinating to me that people will focus so much on what they're afraid of and the negatives, but they don't focus the same way on the positives. And I had this conversation, I can't remember who I was talking to, but I was talking to somebody a couple months ago, and they were concerned with, they were starting to grasp all the different ways that this could not work out for them. And I'm like, you are so focused on what's going to happen if you don't get to what you're trying to accomplish. Have you once thought to yourself, what if you do? It's always, what if I don't? What if I don't make it? But what if you do? No one focuses on how great that can be or how powerful that can be if they do succeed. They're just so focused on all the different ways that they might be embarrassed or that their time might be wasted. And it's like, you're looking at this the wrong way. And the first thing you can fix, and I know it's kind of cliche, but I talk to people all the time about the first thing you need to fix is your attitude. Because attitude is huge when you're trying to do something, especially something that's not going to be easy. If you go into that with the wrong attitude, even with all the talent in the world, you're not going to go very far.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, something I always try to keep in mind is, what do you have control over? What do you have control over right now? Regardless of that external or future endeavor, what can you do about it right now to get stronger, to get better, and what things are making you weaker and softer? And that kind of stoic approach to things, control the controllables, right? You don't have so many things we don't have any control over. And we put so much time and attention and focus and thought, and we dwell on these things like, you don't have any control over that. And the things you do have control over, you're not paying attention to anyway. So those things are definitely going to happen.
You got your focus completely reversed to what it should be.
Yeah. Like, what can you do right now? And you just repeat that every day, every second, every hour. What can you do right now to get you closer? And that's something that fighting, in anything competitive, physical, shows you is, you have this future date for something, and so many times it just like, there's just no fucking way I can do that. I can't. Like, how am I supposed to fight that person? Like, you can't fight that person where you are and who you are right now. But you start working, you start developing, you get stronger and stronger and stronger. And the closer you get to that, the more your mind starts to harden, the more your body starts to harden, the more you start to shift into that completely different person. And you become a completely different person in that moment. You're that human element gets stripped away, and it's just who you really are at your core. And that's something I think is so beautiful about, again, for me, it was fighting, but just competition, to where you have to turn all that external noise off, and you just have to be present in the moment. And there's no real thought. There's no real anything. It's just, you're just there, and you're in that, and you're in it. And that's one of the purest, most beautiful things I think there is, when you let go of everything, and you're just there, you're in it, you're alive. That's what it is to be alive, is to be so present,
Now, with your art and your writing and stuff like that, does that come from the same source as your competitive, as far as a fighter, or did that come later? Do they I know you're really deep into that too.
Yeah, I mean, the art thing, that was my whole life. I mean, I came out of the womb drawing stuff, so that was just always my way of expressing things. And I think that I've got an artistic way of viewing everything, my fighting for certain, just the way that I live in a lot of ways. I view everything through that artistic lens, and then how I apply it, whether it's actual art or writing or fighting or whatever, then that's just an external application of that internal artistic outlook on life that I have.
Right. Just continual expression.
Yeah. But when I was fighting, it's like, that's all I had time for. So a lot of my art started to kind of slip. But that's also where I learned how to find that balance. It's like, I obviously can't push 100% in both aspects, but you don't have to stop one in order to do the other. And, it's learning how to maintain those other balls you're juggling while you're putting so much time and energy and focus into this one thing. And I think that's the hardest part for anyone pursuing excellence in something, is most of the time everything else in our lives can fall apart. Our relationships, our families, our businesses, sometimes if what we're doing is not financially beneficial. So finding that balance there it's really difficult, because you can't really have balance when you're pursuing 100% of something. You do have to just become that person, but you also can find one of my buddies, Eddie, who's actually up there north. He had a good analogy about it, and he's like, you just need to be 100% in that moment when you're doing the thing. It's not necessarily about the time you're putting in with this person or that field. It's how focused are you and how present are you when you're doing that thing. It's like when you're spending time with your family, spend time with your family and be 100% focused there. You can't be thinking about your fight or your lifting or whatever, because then both are suffering. You don't want both to suffer. You have to be there. If you're going to be there, be there. If you're not going to be there, then don't be there. Like when you're in the gym, you better be in the fucking gym, not on your phone, not thinking about your breakup you just had, or like you have to turn all that shit off and you have to be there, or else you're wasting so much of your time. Like you might as well not be there at all if you're not focused.
That's actually an argument I get in with a lot of newer athletes, especially, where they're like, I'm going to go on a 2-week vacation to Italy. I'm not really sure how I'm going to find a gym there. Like, what the fuck are you trying to find? You're going on vacation with your family. Enjoy your vacation. Your body can actually use that 2 weeks off. You're going to recover. You're going to come back stronger. Don't be going on vacation still thinking about all the stuff you're trying to do with training. Like, you've competed one time. You're not at a point where you need to be that intense about it. Enjoy your fucking life, because balance is important. If kind of like what you're saying, if you shut everything else off and you let everything else suffer, eventually that stuff's going to come back and drag you down in some way. If you let those relationships suffer, they're going to come back and be stressful to you later on, whether it's when you finally realized what you let go of, or whether they're coming back in with some sort of stressful drama or something like that. I really like how you put it with, when you're in whatever you're doing, you put 100% of yourself into it at that moment, rather than trying to stress it and be deliberate about the exact percentage of time you're giving to everything. When you're doing each thing, give yourself fully to that. I think that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah. I mean, so many times we're not, again, it's about being present in the moment, right? Yes. So few times are we actually present on the thing that we're doing. We're thinking about something else, or we're thinking about so many things that aren't helping that thing. And you're sacrificing you're sacrificing all these relationships to do this thing, and you're still sacrificing the thing that you're doing. So both things are suffering. You're not putting all yourself into the thing you're sacrificing your family for. So you're making it twice as bad. You're not making it worth the sacrifice that you're giving. If you're gonna sacrifice, you better make that sacrifice worth it, and you better use that time that you have, or else you better do something else, because that is gonna come crashing down on you at the worst possible time.
Yeah, it's wild. You'll be at a restaurant or whatever, you'll see couples on dates and they're on their phones. Like, you couldn't be less present in this moment. And like, what are you even going out to dinner with this person for if you're both on your phone doing shit?
Yeah.
I think that's something, and I think smartphones and the internet, and I'm not trying to sound like an old person, but I think that really has ruined a lot of that. Is people have a lot of trouble being present in each moment and giving themselves to whatever it is they're doing at a given time.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy because now we have this automatic thing that we're all connected to that we can immediately just shift. Like, oh wait, what were we saying? And and that, like, we have zero attention spans anymore for anything, even things like a date, which you wanted to be there. And the second there's like a lull in the action, you're like, I need to be stimulated right now all the time. It's terrible for you. It's terrible for you.
It is.
But it really is kind of like how things go culturally, is that idea, like we talked about how movies started it, but it's that idea that everything can be instantaneous. Like, if you're not, like, everything should be happening right at the time of, like, a comedian I like, Shane Gillis, has a funny bit about like, remember the Titans, how they just solved racism in an 8-week football season. And it's like so many times you see those things where you're just like, the town literally went from being horribly segregated and like actually having protests because of the integration to like the end of a football season. Racism was over. And you're just like, you have this idea. And I think it doesn't help when like apps get shorter and shorter. Like people tell me constantly that our podcast promos are too long because apparently anything more than 30 seconds starts to just drag out, which is like just like the most outrageous thought, to think that like I only have 30 seconds to like make someone want to do this. But I think it takes that time and consistent discipline. And I think it's interesting you brought up the committing to what you do 100%, because I think there's a lot of people I've realized now, based on like Jocko, David Goggins and stuff, of people who like, they love the idea of sacrificing or being overcommitted to something, but they don't fully commit to everything that entails. So it's this idea of like, some people you see, they almost like, it's almost a bragging right of like, I'm doing this instead of being with my family, or I'm doing this instead of going. I've seen that so much. Yeah. Like I like that meme for a while that was like, people who are going nowhere in their lives always have the best Netflix recommendations. I'm like, you should have time to enjoy a few things on Netflix. It isn't this idea that like, oh, you shouldn't have time for anything else if you really have a dream. It's like, even if you train 8 hours a day, what are you doing with the other 8 hours you're awake? Like, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. It's I mean, it's such a like this time we're living in. We've started to condemn those negative feelings of boredom, of depression, of anything. It's like, hey, we got a pill for that. We got an app for that. We got this.
Yeah.
We don't want anyone to feel bad about anything ever. You want everyone should feel good all the time. Everyone should be at this neutral baseline of no life whatsoever, just flatlined. Like, and that's because we've condemned all those things that like, yeah, they're negative, but you need to go through that. The key is not to get stuck in those things. And that's what I always try to tell people when they are going through difficult times, regardless of whether it's training or any just life in general. Like, it's important to feel these things. Like, it's important to, like, if somebody dies, you should feel like shit. You don't want to feel good about it and happy about it and just be like, oh yeah, whatever. You know, the key is not to get stuck in those feelings and let those feelings destroy you. But it's very important to feel like when you lose, you want to feel like shit so it doesn't happen again. Right. Because if you're not motivated to keep it from happening again, it's just going to keep happening, or you're going to cease to push yourself to that level. So you don't have to risk that anymore. But feel those feelings, the good, the bad, and everything in between. What are you going to do with those feelings is the key, and not being stuck in those feelings, regardless of which end of that spectrum it is. Good. You don't want to feel good all the time. Like that ain't no kind of life.
You're absolutely right. It kind of makes you think of like those things like the Stepford Wives or whatever like that, where you have, you've replaced the entire town with perfect people. When you take away chemically or otherwise all the negative emotions, you're removing that contrast, and you really just make people apathetic.
Yeah.
You're lowering the highs by eliminating the lows. And at that point, like you said, it kind of, boredom is one of the things they're eliminating, but it makes life boring. When there's no negatives and the positives aren't just positive, it's just like you're just at the, like you said, it's just a straight line all the time. It's like, what is the point of life at that point?
Yeah.
I think people need to embrace these negative experiences a bit more. And obviously when you're in it, you're not going to enjoy it, but I think people need to appreciate it better. I mean, the whole time I was in the Navy, I fucking hated it. My time in the Navy was absolutely miserable. And it's really easy to fall into that trap of being like, yeah, the Navy took the best years of my life, which is my mid to late 20s. And I'll tell people every time they ask me, I hated every second of the Navy, but if I could go back in time and stop myself from doing it, I absolutely would not, because it did a lot of good things for me. And there's Eminem has a song, Not Afraid. And the beginning of that song to me is really powerful, where he says, I guess I had to go to that place to get to this one. Because it doesn't matter what negative shit you've been through. Without that, you wouldn't be who you are right now. You wouldn't be where you are doing what you're doing right now. I got into strength training because that was the only way I could vent out how pissed off and stuff I was working 84 hours a week in the Navy, which was my minimum work week for 3 years in the shipyard. The gym is what kept my sanity while people around me were breaking left and right because of this, arduous process we were in. And so, I mean, now I'm out of the Navy. My life is really easy and I'm competing strongman at a high level. I wouldn't even know what strongman is if I didn't go through all that negative stuff, because of that negative stuff is what pushed me towards that. I went to the gym and was like, man, I feel so much better. I came in all pissed off. I feel great. I'm going home. I'm not taking it with me. And so I just got more and more and more into it. And at the worst parts of the Navy, I was still going to the gym every single day. Not because I was sitting here like, oh, no matter what, I like no days off or whatever CT Fletcher's always saying. It was, no, this is what's making me feel balanced. This is what's making me feel, less. This is how I'm de-stressing. And so then as I get out of the Navy, I'm like, you know what? I'm not too bad at this thing. Let me see how far I can take this. And I found a passion for it that I never would have known about had I not been through this other stuff. And, plus I was kind of a lazy piece of shit before the Navy. So it definitely rewired my discipline as well.
Yeah.
But it's like you're saying, when you eliminate these negative things, it really kind of waters down life to where it's not worth living anymore. And I don't want that to sound too dark, but I think the negative experiences we have are equally important as the positive ones, even though one is obviously more fun than the other.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to embrace both sides of the spectrum. Again, you have to be willing to deal with the bad to have the good, right? You have to be willing. We have to be willing to die in order to live. There is no in between. But we want to continually take that away. But if we take that away, what are we now? Are we just robots? Are we even human beings anymore? Like, we can't take that away without changing who we are at the fundamental level. And it's so easy to focus on the positives of taking these negative aspects away, but you don't know what you're giving up by doing that, And that's how it's so easy to manipulate people, because you just show them the positive aspects of something, not knowing that there's always both. With everything that you do, no matter how positive something is, there's a negative aspect that comes along with it. And if you're not aware of it when you're doing it, it's gonna catch you when it's too late and you've already committed to this thing. You've already given up so much. You've already given up all your freedoms for safety, and now you have none. And now you're stuck in a prison for the rest of your life.
Yeah. I saw a quote yesterday I really liked. It was, if you go back through your life and erase every negative thing that's ever happened to you, you have also erased yourself. Yeah.
That's the what is it? The complexity of life is you have to have both. It's like, you don't want there to be these shitty things, but if they're not there, and if you did erase them, would you be a better person or a worse person, or even the same person? You have no way to know that. And it's impossible you can't even argue that, because there's no way to prove it anyway.
Yeah.
you just gotta embrace it for what it is. And again, that's where that choice comes into play. You can use this to be better and to be stronger and to be a better person, or you can let it destroy you. Doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter what happened, whether it was negative or positive. It's how you view it and what you do with it from this point forward.
I think that's really important. And I do realize Darren's usually the one who says we try to keep things around an hour, but this is actually over my lunch break, so we do have to wind down. And I thought that was a really great note to kind of end things on. Is that? Do
you have anything to promote right now, Kevin?
Yeah.
Me?
I know you've written books and stuff. And
oh yeah, I mean, people can go on my website. It's thesoulassassin.com, and I have my books and my merch and stuff on there. But no, I'm not really promoting nothing.
Okay.
Just living.
Yeah, just living. Just trying to be alive.
It was great having you on.
It was great talking to you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on with us and sharing your
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and follow us on Instagram for updates. We'll catch you next time on World's Strongest Opinions.